No, it's fine.
Here we go.
This year, the U.S. government will receive about $2.4 trillion in taxes. That's so much money, like more than I can even think of. So, what does the government do with all that money? I've done some research, and today I'll be going over the 3 general categories the government spends money on. There's mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and interest on the national debt. And you can see in the chart how much of each spending category, gets. So even though the government is receiving $2.4 trillion, the budget that they make every year is about $3.7 trillion. So you can obviously do the math. The national debt is now over $16 trillion. And many people in our country believe that we're on the verge of financial collapse. But before we should call them crazy or start panicking, we need to look at the facts ourselves. So the first category I'm going to talk about is mandatory spending. Mandatory spending means that there are certain laws that require the government to spend money on things, like Social Security, which took up 30% of the mandatory spending in 2010. Medicare is the next biggest category, which took up about 19% of mandatory spending. And the third highest is income security, which is things like unemployment compensation, government worker benefits, disability benefits, and then retirement and insurance, excluding Social Security, obviously, and other things like that. And pretty soon, Obamacare will be included in mandatory spending, which will cut into the budget even more. So the second category is discretionary spending. It takes up most of the remaining third of the budget. And it goes mostly to defense and domestic programs. The national defense takes up a little over half of discretionary funding, and in dollar forms, that's about $689 billion out of the $1.3 billion that discretionary funding gets. And there are a lot of programs included in the domestic programs category too, like health, education, energy, agriculture, parks, natural resources, local governments. And the last part is foreign aid, which really only gets a tiny sliver of that. Probably about 4% of discretionary spending goes to foreign aid. Okay, so the last category that the government spends money on is the national debt. The national debt, we service the national debt about 5% of our budget. And in 2010, we gave it the lowest amount that we have in over 50 years. With the national debt at $16 trillion and a budget deficit of $1.3 trillion, there's no money to be paying off our debt at all. If that 5% of the budget is actually spent on paying off our debt, it would only be about $185 billion a year that we're paying. And that doesn't even make a dent, since we incur about $388 billion per day in debt. So after I did this research, I think I figured out that we're in financial trouble here. And looking at how the government spends our money, I'm concerned about our future. So I didn't have time to go through each government program and research how much money is in each one. Plus that would be really boring to listen to, probably. But if you want more information about the budget or the deficit or the debt, you can look at my sources. I went to the Tax Policy Center, website, the Government Printing Office website, ourdime.us, which is a blog, and the Peter G. Peterson Foundation is where I got all my charts. And then I also looked at the Congressional Budget Office. So, please learn more, and thank you for listening.